of our strategic rice, corn, and other grain areas, staple areas.
Okay. Maybe, are you okay? No more follow-up?
Yes, and I would also like to ask about your views on or your plans about the livestock industry.
Uh, Actually, I don't think there has been any successful livestock industry here. I admit that, I really do not have any current experience on it. We had some before. Number one is to find the right kind of livestock to raise here. And number two, when you say livestock, I think of cattle. But we are the biggest backyard hog raising center in Asia, and we are one of the largest poultry producers in Asia. Fortunately, for those two industries, there is something going for the Philippines, that we have withstood successfully any threat of swine flu and avian flu. We have successfully dealt with it, and fortunately, we're never hit by it. So there is really a market for Philippine hogs and processed meat products, as well as poultry and processed poultry products. The problem is standardizing backyard hog raisers, the quality of hogs, which needs a whole infrastructure, which I think is devolved to the local government units, through the provincial veterinarians and the municipal agriculture officers. I think these are devolved. But it is again a place where national government can work in partnership with the private sector to improve as one of the export areas, at least hogs and chickens. As a matter of fact, there was an offer, and I will not say what company offered, during the aftermath of Ondoy. As part of those who will be relocated to an area within Central Luzon, and this company would invest into not high-tech but labor-intensive poultry raising once again. So it is perhaps an area, now that you mentioned it, to explore. Now for cattle, I've not heard of any successful cattle raising industry here. For the simple reason, I think that it is more economical for them to graze rather than to be fed feeds. So there's a lack of grazing area in the Philippines, pasture area in the Philippines. So perhaps it would be incentivizing people to have the capital investments for, I don't think small-scale cattle raising will work, large-scale cattle raising, so that there can be an economy of scale. But I think some have tried, but none have been successful. And I think the challenge is to look for the right breed of cattle in the right area. Imported meat, the meat products also are an issue, so I think the real question is, like Masbate, perhaps can it fill the beef needs of our country? Probably there was less conflict in the area, yes, perhaps. But I think I'll have to look deeper into that. But I do know that in terms of hogs and in terms of poultry, there's a lot of things that we can do, particularly poultry exports of processed chickens to Japan and other countries. There was also a problem of smuggling of imported chicken before. I think we'll have to clamp down hard on that.
Okay, we can move on to Ras Vival, for Vival Foundation.
Yeah, my question is about your vision for providing low-cost housing for millions of Filipinos, and what your views on non-governmental organizations like Habitat for Humanity and Gawad Kalinga, that's very much concerned on this social problem.
Okay. The participation of non-governmental issues on a government program such as housing is very, very welcome. And as much private sector participation as possible is fine. I mean, you encourage it, but it is not an essential solution to perhaps a structural problem that you have to solve. What do you have to do? Number one, again, is to provide job opportunities so that people can avail on a sustainable basis of government-supported cheap housing mortgage facilities. On a sustainable basis, I say, because with more permanent jobs, they can have access to two things: institutional housing support, which has a contribution on the part of the worker too, because you cannot have a moral hazard anyway. You have to have some risk participation. And socialized healthcare, which is sadly lacking in our country. So that is the challenge, employing more people so they can be formally recipients of sustainable housing programs in partnership with the private sector. I think that yun ang punot dulo niyan. Because you can have housing, but if there's no income to support the housing or to pay up the cheap housing loan, even student loans for that matter, you fall flat on your face. You'll have the next generation of rundown dwellings. Now, there is a problem back. Here in Metro Manila, the socialized housing must be medium-rise. It cannot be any more single dwellings. Must be medium-rise.
The follow-up of that is what is your thoughts, or if you're in the become president, is the policy on informal settling, which is a very big problem here in the capital.
There are two things that you can do. Number one is to supervise and monitor the local government units very closely and tell them not to add more. To refuse actively through community participation additional informal dwellers. Okay. Because sometimes it's also the lack of vigilance, if not sometimes in certain areas, actual complicity of barangay officials. Because that's why informal settling happens. Number three, you should also try, the problem is also a question of opportunities. Even if you resettle them, they had the experience in the Balik Probinsya program. The Balik Probinsya program of government will give you 3 times monthly minimum wage. 60 days, I think, of minimum wage if you go back to your province. They were escorted. I think some people from Mindanao were escorted into the boat, but when they got out of sight in Manila Bay, they jumped in the water. Came back. Babalik at babalik eh. And not only is that a problem here, but I was reading this morning, China is faced with that kind of the most massive urbanization or urban migration that any country in history will ever face happening in China. That's why they're leading in energy investments right now, because they're going to have a power gap. So with us, I think we should really be thankful in one sense that urbanization is not as brisk and there is still time to cure its ills or to plan adequately for it in other areas. Of course, Metro Manila is a different case. But informal settling as a policy should not be condoned, because it is not merely a hazard to physical infrastructure, but more importantly, a hazard to the people living in these informal structures in themselves, particularly those who don't have an intelligent choice, meaning to say the children. They're the first at risk. No? But having said that, it's easier than having to do something about it, because actually you will have to physically relocate them and provide sustainable means of livelihood for them. And then what is essential is that the government has the capacity